And the smart money was on, I bet the only people who sit in the front row are the speakers and Tim. And we were right, we were right. This afternoon and this evening session is a really fantastic opportunity to start the brain cells working in a strategic way and in the lines of moral purpose and why you are all in this together in the challenging context that we now are. We've got as a subheading for this conference a values anchor in stormy sea. A values anchor in a stormy sea. And I think that little title will probably run a few times through the course of the next day and a half, 2 days. But we're starting off with two of the best people that I can think of to give us a sense of a stormy sea and values anchors. Two of the very best people I can think of. We're going to have the two speakers speaking one after the other, and then we're going to do a joint Q&A session with the two of them. And our first speaker is Sir David Carter, who needs probably no introduction to you as the National Schools Commissioner. And Sir David, as well as being one of the most important and influential figures in our education system, you know, and I'm thinking of a couple of people, really, and he's one of them, is also somebody that we know from of old is absolutely driven by principle, absolutely driven by excitement for the very best opportunities for children and young people, and is one of the best strategic thinkers in the profession that I've ever come across. His way of understanding the bigger picture and then helping others to shape the bigger picture, I think is almost unparalleled. So Sir David is going to be our first speaker. And our second speaker is another one of the most influential figures in education, Steve Munby. And again, many of you will know Steve Munby from his time as Chief Executive of the National College for School Leadership, and latterly as Chief Executive for the Education Development Trust, where his influence spread globally, not just nationally, because Education Development Trust does a huge amount of work across the world and in some of the most challenging circumstances across the world that there are. And Steve, again, is one of those people who lights the fire in our hearts, is driven by moral purpose, and is able to excite us to feel that moral purpose as well. And through that has become as well one of the most influential figures in the sector. So it's a great privilege to welcome them both. We'll start with Sir David, move straight on to Steve, and then we'll do a joint Q&A. Can we welcome David Carter, please?
Good afternoon, everybody. Let me just find my place for this. Did you want, Tim, this isn't what you wanted me to say? I'll just keep going from there. Okay. Great. Okay, just talk amongst yourselves for a moment. How are we doing here? Oh, I recognise that name. I recognise that name. Okay, start again. Good afternoon. It's great to be here. So when you talk about stormy seas and values, I hope I'm not the stormy seas and Steve's the values. So what I thought I'd do this afternoon is to share with you some of the thinking that I've been working on really probably since the late spring, early summer. which is to try to build a narrative that I hope would resonate in classrooms in your schools around how we think and conceive of school improvement. And it comes, I suppose, from, as many of you will know, my own experience of being a head, of being a CEO, of being an RSC, and now the National Schools Commissioner, because my role is about school improvement. That's what I wanted it to be when I came into it in February 2016. And I think that over the course of the last 18 months, I've been able to establish it as that kind of a job. And the challenge for me, I think, and the challenge for us is, how do we improve the system from the classroom up, not from the DFE down? That's the challenge. And I sit right in the middle of that conundrum. And so my influence, if I have any, is to try to help people understand what is it really like to improve a school at the school-facing level. So here's some thoughts about how that works. And these are things that I think are driving a lot of my thinking at the moment. The first one of those is that we have to have an honest conversation that school improvement, real school improvement, that stands the test of time, does take time. I think between 3 and 5 years is probably about right. And whilst I absolutely accept that we can see green shoots after 6 weeks, after 6 months, you cannot assume that at that point that the school that you're leading, that you're trying to improve, is going to be sustainably good. It's about the time and the energy and the way that you change the culture of the school and you build slowly from the ground up what you want to do. My second bit of thinking around what I've been doing over the summer is that at the moment, the history of school improvement, particularly in the academy world, I have to say, has been that the strongest schools become sponsors and they support the weaker schools in the system. And that's been a good model, but it misses about 60% of the system out. And so I am interested in what do we do with these schools that are neither at the very top of the system in terms of being outstanding for 20 years and those schools at the very bottom, but the schools in the middle and what capacity that they bring. And so my thinking is that we need to do as much about prevention as we do about intervention. And how does that work through? My third premise is that I think schools don't go in straight line school improvement lines. I think they've improved sequentially over time, and sometimes it goes wrong. And sometimes it's really messy, and you have to go forward 2 spaces in order to go back and start again. It's not a straight line linear progression. And we need to understand and have that honest conversation about how that works. And I think the other thing is schools are judged almost exclusively on the basis of results and Ofsted judgments, whereas they are the end point of school improvement. If you think about a school that you might have taken over, let's imagine you become a head or a CEO of a group of schools last couple of weeks, September 2017, and the results in 2017 were awful. The results in 2018 might get worse, but you'll be doing the right things. And there's that lag, isn't there, between the outcomes and the Ofsted judgment and what you're putting in place. How do we measure in-year improvement? If we were running a business, we'd find out every 3 months, every quarter we get a return on how our business was developing. We don't do that. We have results in July or August, depending whether we're in primary or secondary. And that's the point that we measure it. But it doesn't mean to say that a school isn't improving in the middle part of that. So the formula that I've begun to think about is this one: strategy, the plan, what are we going to do, plus the capacity, who's going to help me, plus pace, let's get on with it, is the key to that improvement. And I don't really care whether that's an academy, a maintained school, a diocesan school, a UTC, a studio school, it doesn't really matter. The point is that actually our leaders are doing that every day, and we need to reflect that from the school up when we're thinking about how that works. Wrapped around that is my view that if you take the thought that schools are probably improving or declining, but they're not necessarily standing still, very rarely do they stand still, we need every school in the system, all 21,000, to either be a capacity giver or a capacity taker. So if I'm taking my school from special measures on a journey, right now I don't have enough people in my school that know what good looks like. So I have to be a capacity taker. I have to get help to come and support me on my journey. But when my school's good and outstanding in 5 years' time, there's a debt to be repaid to the system. Not a financial debt, but a debt that says in 2022, I should help another school. Because at the moment, we use the rhetoric and the language of a school-led system, but we haven't really got one. We need more people to play that role. More people to think about their responsibility to the schools in their community as capacity givers to those people that need to take it. And I think it works in 2 ways. So you have organizations that are capacity givers that on the left-hand side. You recognize those. And on the right-hand side, we have the people, the designated system leaders across the system. Organisations on their own don't change anything, people do. So the values theme around what we're going to be talking about for the next hour or so is about how do those people make that difference. And I see it in two ways. So if I'm in a position where I've got an organisation that can provide capacity to a group of schools, on the left-hand side, I want to find a way that enables the school to be connected to the wider world. Because if one of my challenges is I don't have enough good practice in my own school at the moment, I have to go and find it. Because I have to show my colleagues what it looks like. I have to paint a picture of what it will look like in 5 or 6 years' time while we're developing it ourselves. So the first responsibility is to do some of those things around some of the diagnostics, but also some of the introduction of great practice that is outside our school. But then you have to bring it into the school, and that's the other challenge. And it's that ability to sort of look at the challenge of what the school needs and finding what the solution is going to be, the treatment, if you like, of what that diagnosis tells you. But one of our challenges is that some schools who are in real trouble have 15 to 20 people helping them. That's just chaotic. You can't process 15 to 20 different bits of advice. So we've got to be absolutely sure, when I'm leading my team of RSCs, that when we're commissioning that support, it's the right people for the right context, which is why I feel really strongly that those leaders who've taken a school from special measures to good, or way below floor to now being a really healthy school doing really well for its community, they may not have a badge, but they've got a role to play. And that's what I mean by balancing the capacity givers with the capacity takers. This is deliberately meant to be a mess. This is deliberately meant to look chaotic because it's what I think the school improvement map looks like. Let me say at the very outset at the moment, this is not, absolutely not, another attempt to categorize schools. This is not about saying that we're going to find different ways to describe schools that works in conflict with what the Ofsted inspection framework does. What it does attempt to do